The snow had fallen thick that morning, turning the plains of Montana into a white, endless silence. The small wooden church stood alone, a warm amber glow leaking through its frosted windows. Inside, a woman stood before the altar, nervous, hands trembling, her heart pounding like a trapped bird. Her name was Clara May. She wasn't the kind of bride the townsfolk expected for a man like Luke Dawson, a tall, rugged rancher with land stretching as far as the eye could see. Whispers had already begun before the ceremony even started. "He must have lost a bet," someone muttered. "She's too big to catch a man like him," another said. Clara had heard every cruel word. She'd lived with them her whole life. "No one marries a fat girl," her stepmother used to say. "So you better learn to cook if you ever want to survive." And she had. Clara could turn flour and butter into comfort, could roast a chicken that melted hearts faster than any smile could. But that morning, even her best pie couldn't sweeten the fear twisting inside her chest. Luke Dawson stood at the end of the aisle, his hat in his hands, his jaw strong and unreadable. He wasn't smiling. He looked tired, like a man carrying too much weight of his own. The preacher cleared his throat, but Clara barely heard the words. Her palms were slick with sweat. Her throat was dry. And before she even knew what she was doing, the words tumbled out of her trembling lips. "No one marries a fat girl, sir, but I can cook." The room froze. Her voice cracked, echoing through the church like a confession. A gasp rippled through the guests. Clara's face burned red. She wanted the earth to swallow her whole, but Luke didn't move. For a moment his blue eyes studied her, quiet, searching, almost wounded. Then he took a slow step forward. "Ma'am," he said, voice deep and steady, "I didn't come here for a cook." Clara blinked, unsure she heard him right. He kept walking until he was right in front of her, so close she could smell the scent of cedar and cold wind on his coat. "I came here for a wife," he said, "and I reckon a man's got no business judging a woman by what she ain't. You got more courage than most folks in this room, and that's something worth holding on to." Clara's breath caught. The preacher hesitated, glancing at Luke, then at her, then back again. The whispers stopped. The church seemed to fade away until it was just the two of them, a broken woman and a man who saw something more than her size. "Do you still want to do this?" he asked softly. She nodded, tears filling her eyes. "Yes," she whispered. His hand brushed her cheek, a simple touch that made her knees weak, and the vows began. When the preacher declared them husband and wife, Luke didn't hesitate. He kissed her, gentle but firm, like a promise he intended to keep. Outside, the wind howled across the empty plains, but inside that tiny church, a fire had been lit. After the ceremony, the newlyweds rode together to Luke's ranch, miles of snow shimmering under the pale sun. Clara sat behind him on the horse, her hands trembling as she held onto his waist. "You don't have to pretend," she said softly. "About being proud to have me." He glanced over his shoulder. "Pretend?" he repeated. "Darling, I'm more proud than you'll ever know." Life on the ranch wasn't easy. Clara rose before dawn, cooking for the ranch hands, fixing the stove, mending shirts. But slowly, the house that once echoed with emptiness began to fill with warmth. The smell of bread baking, the sound of laughter, the sight of Luke's tired smile after a long day. Yet, the townsfolk still whispered, "She's not fit for him," they'd say at the market. "He'll tire of her soon enough." But Luke never gave them the satisfaction of a response. He'd just take Clara's hand and lead her out the door, chin high. One evening, months later, Clara sat on the porch, watching the sunset burn gold across the sky. She sighed. "You could have had anyone, Luke. Why me?" He set his hat down, sat beside her, and said, "Because when I saw you, I saw a woman who'd never been loved right. And I figured maybe it was time someone did." Her eyes glistened. "But I'm not—" "Don't," he cut in gently. "You're everything." In the following years, Clara's cooking became known across the valley. Travelers would stop by Dawson Ranch just to taste her biscuits or her peach cobbler. But it wasn't the food that changed people's minds. It was the way. Luke looked at her while she cooked, like she hung the very stars in the sky. One day, When a group of ladies from town came to see how she managed, one of them sneered, "Well, I guess a man's got to settle for comfort if not for beauty." Clara smiled, wiping her hands on her apron. "Oh, honey," she said sweetly, "a man settles when he marries for looks. Mine chose love, and that's something beauty can't bake." Years later, when their children played in the snow outside the same church where they'd wed, Clara would sometimes remember that day, her shaking hands, her breaking voice, and his steady eyes. "No one marries a fat girl," she had said. But Luke Dawson had, and he hadn't just married her, he'd believed in her. She built a life, a home, and a legacy that stood stronger than the cruel words that once defined her. And every time she looked at the man who changed everything with one reply, she whispered a silent prayer of gratitude.